Kannico headquarters in Delray Beach, Florida. I am Carrie Howell, and I'm the Managing Director of Nonprofit Leadership here. And you may notice one person's missing from the table today, and so we're going to have a lot of fun because Kirsten's out of town. So this can go in whatever direction we want. So if she's watching live from California right now, we have the things holding down, but we'll try to keep it, try to make you proud today. So you guys all know my colleague Paton.
Hi everybody. Nice to be here again.
You've seen the videos she's done. She's phenomenal. I glean from her every time I'm with her, so it's just so great to sit and talk with you.
That's lovely to hear.
So we're going to continue the conversation that Kirsten started last week, talking about grants. And we get this question a lot from people who call and they say, I want you to do grant writing. And sometimes we dig in and we find out they're not ready to write grants. So I guess, kind of dig into this. How does an organization, let's pretend it's an organization just starting out. How do they know when they're ready to write grants?
Well, one thing to remember, and I always like to start talking about grants this way, because I think a lot of nonprofits believe that most of the money in philanthropy in the U.S. comes from grants, and that's not true. In fact, 71% of the money that comes from philanthropy is derived from individual donors.
Wow.
So that's always going to be the most important thing, and I think many nonprofits believe that grants are going to save their life, but really grants only bring in 15.5% of the money.
Wow.
So when you're thinking about writing grants, think about who on my staff has time to do this, because we all know how much time it takes to raise a major gift, often close to 2 years. So if you're getting into grants, you have to make sure that you have the wherewithal, the firepower to write those grants. Who on your staff is a good writer? Who on your staff has the time to dig in and begin to research and write the grants? Because before you choose a grant to write, you have to make sure that that funder's mission meshes really well with your mission.
Okay.
And that the goals that you're presenting are likely to be goals that will resonate with that particular funder.
How do you know that? How can you find out we know, Googling it, looking at websites, but what do you look for on the website or what do you look for even when we talked about Foundation Directory? How do you know they align?
Well, if you're looking on Foundation Directory and let's say that your charity is one that saves abused animals.
Yeah, sure.
Then in that case, you would want to make sure that from looking at Foundation Directory that you're looking for animal-related charities that fund in your area. This is a mistake that is very often made. You get really excited when you see that there are like 2,900 funders that fund abused animal charities in the United States. Well, how many fund in the area where I am? How many fund in Palm Beach County? How many fund in South Palm Beach County? When you're in Foundation Directory or even looking at somebody's 990 through GuideStar, you can see who they funded and where they are. And if they've never funded a grant in your area, then chances are you're not going to be number one.
What do you mean by your area? Like, what if it's Florida? Because we're in Florida, and what if I look at it and I say, oh, they have, we're in South Florida, and what if someone has given to Tampa, which is a few hundred miles from here? I think that's right. I'm still new to this area.
Yes, it is right. And if that's very much North Florida. If they've never given a grant in our area of Florida, in South Florida, in Palm Beach County, then you maybe don't want to put them number one on your list.
Okay.
But if you really feel that your mission aligns with their mission, you might want to call them and say, I really loved your website, and we're doing something very similar to what you seem to be interested in. Would you fund an organization in Palm Beach County?
So it's okay to call them?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, I always recommend that when you're pursuing grants and you think that you have a match, it's a great idea to call them and tell them who you are and what it is that you are trying to achieve.
Okay.
Because that funder's likely to remember you. everyone's afraid to call foundations.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
You need to get over it.
So they want to hear from the...
Yes, they do, and they're likely to remember you. When your grant comes in, you can put a little note on it and say, thank you so much for speaking to me. Here's the proposal that we talked about by phone.
How do you know if you should call them? Do you have any feedback on that? Like, for example, I know if you go into Foundation Directory, kind of digging in a little bit deeper to what Kirsten talked about, what if it says we don't accept solicited people who we don't accept, what is the wording they use? Unsolicited requests. Is that, I think that's the wording. What do you do then? You don't call them, or should you try to call them?
Well, sometimes what I've done, because I've been working with a nonprofit that has done a lot of successful grantsmanship, and they come across one of these, we don't accept unsolicited requests. You can call them. You can also, sometimes they have an email address available. They have contact information. If they have contact information, then you know that they are likely to accept questions. So you can call them and say, I know you don't accept unsolicited requests. Here's what we do. Would you be willing to take a look at an LOI? And if our LOI meets with your approval, let us know, and then we'll apply. And sometimes, surprisingly, they'll say, wow, that project that you're doing sounds really great.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a great point. I want to go back to something. I wrote it down because I think it's so important that the calls we get, and I'm going to paint a picture of a call we got just this week. Someone calls, they've been in operation, like they have filed their paperwork, had their nonprofit status for 2 years. What do they need to know about before they can start applying for grants? Are they ready? Let's say their budget's $25,000.
Well, many funders will say we need to see 3 990s from you, because these funders are just like investors in a business. They want to know that they're investing in something that's sustainable. And until you've been around for 3 years and have filed 3 990s, you're going to be in that ooh zone. So I would say don't apply for grants until you've got your third 990 generally, because it's so much work to write these grants, and you don't want them to be discarded and you be discouraged, when really all you need to do is wait a little bit and continue to grow your organization. Another thing that funders will often say is we want to see that you have a budget of $50,000 or more for 3 years in a row.
Ah, that's a great point. So that means does that mean an income coming in at $50,000? Because, and the only reason I say that is I know sometimes people will look at $25,000 of in-kind dollars are coming in. Is that okay? Or does it need to be cash that they have coming in?
It needs to be a budget of $50,000 or more.
Okay, where they know it's cash going in, money going out, expenses going out.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's pretend you're in your year 4. You've got 3 years of your 990 under your belt. I want to write a grant for $10,000. Is that realistic? Let's say my budget's $50,000. Is $10,000 realistic, or do I need to start a little smaller?
Well, if it's your first time out, you might want to try for a grant of $5,000. But let's say you have some other funders that you're writing for a project, and you've got some individual funders and maybe one other foundation funder that are already on board with this project. If that's the case, then you may have the credibility to go for the $10,000. And sometimes funders will say, oh, I can't quite give you $10,000, but I can give you $2,500 or $5,000. So there's another case where you might want to call them and say, this is the situation that I'm in. I have some individual funders that want to fund this project, and you seem like such a great match for it. Would you be interested in hearing from us for this project? And just take a minute to describe it.
Okay. And what happens if is it better to ask for too much or too little? I know a question we get is, can I apply for 10,000 and their range is 5 to 10? Or people, we have a big heart in the nonprofit industry, so people are like, oh no, I should instead ask for 5. I don't want to seem greedy. I hear that question a lot. What's the better?
Well, the way that I figure it out usually is to go into Foundation Directory or look at the 990 for that organization and try to figure out what their average level grant is.
That makes sense.
So if it's your first time out, don't go above that average level.
Okay. Where can people access Foundation Directory? I know that Kirsten's talked about it in some of her previous videos. We've referred to it because it's obviously something we use a ton of here. And if they can't afford the membership, how can people access that?
One really great way to access it is through the Junior League of Palm Beach County. Their office in Boca Raton not only has computers that you can sit at to look at Foundation Directory. If you call them, they also give lessons in how to use Foundation Directory effectively.
That's wonderful.
And I've taken those myself, and I found them really valuable. And the people who are doing the teaching are so patient and open to your questions, and it's really, really helpful.
Okay.
The library in West Palm Beach has the directory. You have to go there to use it. The Community Foundation also has it, and will let area nonprofits use the directory there.
Okay. And so if people are in another state watching this, they should check with their local Junior League, their local library, or their own community foundation. Because it sounds, I know being from North Carolina, our Junior League did the same thing there. So it sounds like something Junior Leagues are just fantastic about. And so certainly if someone's listening, check with your local organizations too. So one of the things, I just had a call a few minutes ago with someone, does it matter who you know when it comes to getting a grant?
Sure it does.
Okay.
In fact, when you're looking at Foundation Directory, one of the cool things that
That's
Foundation
not the answer I
Directory
wanted, by the way.
is see who's on their board. And then they check the people that are on LinkedIn on Foundation Directory. So a lot of times that board will have at least one person who's on LinkedIn, and then you can go on LinkedIn and see if there are people in that person's circle that maybe you have a connection to, or maybe somebody on your board has a connection to.
It's a great thing about LinkedIn. That's
yes,
wonderful.
It's
That's
wonderful, and that's a really cool way to use it.
Well, you just brought up something interesting, and I know that social media is not what you and I do. Our behind the camera lady does that. But does that mean our board members should also make sure they have a LinkedIn page and that it's up to date, because they might be checking also the community foundation or different foundations, maybe looking at our board members?
Well, that's a really good point, Carrie. I love the idea that we, as part of our training of our board members and how they can be helpful to us in fundraising, because fundraising is one of the big responsibilities of board membership, is to have them do that, because it's something that many of them maybe already have, but they haven't thought about how that could be useful to your nonprofit.
Right.
So talking to everybody about that and having them be part of your grants team in that way, that they may share their connections with you, is going to be really, really helpful.
Well, I know I took us off track a second, but taking us back around, and as Kirsten alludes, we have a nice board behind us because that tells us to stay focused and it tells us where to go today. So let's review for a minute. Kirsten talked a little bit last week about parts of an LOI and putting the budget in and putting a feel-good story and making sure that you talk about your mission. Is there anything else that people need to know? Let's say they are going to write their own grant and they've decided they've got the right team member, to your point. What else should they expect that they need to have ready to go so they're not scrambling last minute and, oh my gosh, I don't have this document, I never thought to have this. Is there anything else we're missing out of those?
A lot of times this gets left out, and it's really important. What are your goals? You're talking about a project that you want to do. What are the goals of that project? And what are the outcomes that you're going to measure as part of your work on that project? And if you're able to succinctly articulate those in your LOI, then you're ahead of a lot of other people who are sending their information to that funder. Okay.
So can you give an example of that, of how maybe a time where, just something you can think of, where people aren't really thinking about their goals? Are you saying maybe that it's written too broadly and it's not really clear enough?
It has to be specific.
Okay.
You're talking about a project that you want to do over the next 3 years, let's say. How will you know that project is successful? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to talk about your success?
Right. That's key, isn't it? Having that data and having that. I think for new nonprofits, a lot of times I'll say, gosh, start that data collecting now, because it's invaluable, even if it starts small with how you're going to measure it. So that's really helpful. One question we get a lot too when you're digging into all these pieces you have to write, does the writing really matter? if they're have the relationship and they know Mr. Smith and he's, you know, he loves us, what if the writing's just okay? Does that matter?
Oh, you're asking somebody who thinks writing is really important.
I know.
So,
I want to see your face if you would just start crying. Or
of course I'm going to say that writing matters. Yeah. Do not send out a grant without having somebody proof it for you, for instance. Because imagine what the view of the readers on that board of the foundation are going to be if your application is full of typos.
Yeah.
Or if you've left out half a sentence.
Right.
You know, you move things around in these applications a lot as you're working on them, and you are so close to it. If you're the writer, by the time you're finished, it's likely that there are some things in there that could be tweaked.
Right.
And so I always like to bring my grant to somebody else in the organization to look at, and it's really amazing what happens, because sometimes not only is that other person pointing out little typos that you may have made, missing commas, or you've got a word misspelled that spell check didn't catch.
Sure.
But they often see something that maybe you didn't see.
Yeah. You
didn't bring up this point.
Gosh, Annie, as long as you've been writing, you still have someone proof your grants.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, that's huge, because I'm speaking with organizations. There will be people who think, I'm the senior writer, no one needs to read behind me, no one needs to check this. And I think that's reassuring, that it doesn't mean that they're saying they have a weakness, but that they have the strength in knowing that they're so easy to make mistakes.
You know, I have worked with a couple of people who have gone through, in this very tedious fashion, every single word in a grant that we've worked on together. Every single word, like 2 or 3 times even.
Wow.
And in that tedious process, your application is getting better and better
that's a
and
great
better.
Point.
So by the time you send it in, you're saying to yourself, and your partner's also saying, this grant is as perfect as it can be.
Right.
And I can tell you that the people who spend the time to do that with their grant writer have a much higher rate of success with their grants.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you send the grant in. Do you do anything fun? Like, I should throw in a little tchotchke, or like a little pen and notebook, or I need to like butter them up. I'm gonna send them 20 pieces of collateral.
You have to be really careful about that, because you can cause the funder to throw away your application without looking at it if you don't follow the instructions.
Okay.
Sometimes they tell you, this is what you can add.
Okay.
Follow those instructions carefully.
And the word count too, right? Even looking down to the word count. Even if you've got great things to say, that's another big piece, right?
It's so funny that you bring that up.
I just saw your face get like, oh yeah, this is a big one.
I've written some grants that will say, this answer can be 250 words and this many characters. So you have to be really careful, because if you have to fit in both of those things. Because sometimes 250 words is over the character count. You have to balance both of those things. You can't say, well, I did 250 words, so it's right.
Right.
If it has both the character count and the words, you have to make sure you've done both of those things before you complete that grant.
Okay. Wow, those are great points. So let's fast forward. You get that letter in the mail or that phone call that says, I'm so sorry. We loved your mission, but we have not selected you this year. Is there anything you can do to increase your chances, or just to be a good steward of the time they took to read this? What advice do you have?
If you get a rejection and you were so sure you were going to get funded, or even if you weren't sure you were going to get funded, you can't imagine what it is that could have made your application better than it was. Don't be afraid to call them and ask if you could have a little conversation about why you didn't get funded, because sometimes the funder will be generous enough to spend time with you to say, you didn't articulate your goals very well. You should have been more definite about how you described what you were going to achieve. Or, we really want programs that are not so educationally focused. We really want more youth development. And you have to understand what the difference between those two things are, and they're going to help you. They're going to help you see why you didn't fit their mold.
Sure. Okay, that's really helpful. What if you get the grant? Should you pick up the phone and call them? Should you get your board member to call? What do you do?
I wouldn't pick up the phone and call them.
Okay.
But what I would do is thank them, and don't make the mistake of not reporting to them.
Okay. What does that mean, reporting?
Okay. Well, let's say quarterly, you're thinking about something that you've accomplished that has to do with what they're funded. You just send them a very short message that says, we want to thank you again so much for your funding. Look what's happening because of your support.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the year, make sure that you do, when you've come to the end of your funding period, make sure that you send them a fully blown analysis, whether they ask for it or not, of what you accomplished based on their funding.
Okay.
And where you stand with your project. And if you're really smart, what are your next steps going to be?
Okay.
Because it could be that those next steps are really going to resonate with them, and then you're going to do your next application.
Should you send that even if they don't request it?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You want to keep those funders close to you as long as you can, and the only way that's going to happen is if you steward them well. Okay. Because they're very much like the individual donors that you have in your stable. You want to keep them close to you, and the best way to do that is to give them information about how their money is being used.
That's important, isn't it? I mean, that's huge. I'm going to throw you a curveball for a second, but I know that you'll be able to answer this. I know. What happens if, let's pretend we applied for a school bus, and we said, hey, we need a bus. It's $80,000. I'm sure I'm way off on the numbers here. And we only spent $75,000 of it. What do we do about that? Let's say the grant came in, it was $80,000, and there's $5,000 left. What do we do about that? If there's money left over from,
I think that as soon as you know that that's the case, you need to let them know. And when you call them to let them know, you've already discussed what is it that we could do with this $5,000.
Oh, so you don't just offer to give it right back. You
complementary to the cost of the bus that they paid for with their grant. Let's say you're going to have a bus sustainability fund, and this is going to pay for the maintenance on the bus, so that the funder is sure that that bus that they bought you is going to stay in good running order for as long as the $5,000 that was the overage lasted. And maybe you're even going to invite other donors to give to the transportation maintenance fund.
Okay. So they're not going to be offended that I didn't spend it and that I didn't price it right, or the price changed?
I think as soon as you know, funders are pretty generous.
Okay.
Their hearts are in the right place already. So if you're transparent about what's happening, as soon as you know that there's an issue, they're very likely to be so grateful for that.
Yeah, that's huge, because I think sometimes people fear that they're going to be mad, or it got overbid, or why was it underbid, or whatever the situation might be. So that's good that it sounds like, I think we forget they're just human, and they're not the scary person behind the curtain that we're never going to meet, and that they're going to be mad at us, that they really want what's best for us. I think that gets missed sometimes.
I think it does too. I think the most important thing is to have good communication with the funder.
Sure. So one of the things as we close up today, we want to remind people to join our Facebook forum, because these are great opportunities to ask these type of questions. Our team is engaged on it, so you get an opportunity to get some free advice, which is fantastic. And you can actually go to our, you can subscribe on our Global Good channel on YouTube, which is a great opportunity to see all the videos we're creating. Even go on our website, throw us an email and say, hey, you know what I'd like to see a video on is X, or we did one on major gifts, or it could be hiring your first executive director, or it could be, hey, my board's not working with me, what do I do? So make sure you go on, email us if there's something you'd like for us to see, because we've been in the trenches, we're still in the trenches, we both still actively work with nonprofits, and you do a ton of consulting and advising and writing still, and we all have our niche, but we'd love to help in any way we can. So is there anything else we should talk about that I might have missed today? Just kind of digging in a little deeper with the grant writing.
Oh, gee, let me think.
Let me think as I look at our list up there. I think we've covered the main topics today, and I think there's so much more we could talk about with this, because you have nonprofits who are just starting out to nonprofits who have been operating for 20 years, and they may see the video and go, oh, I've got all of that. And so I think we probably need a part 2 of this to really talk about what do you do when you've been doing this 20 years and your grant writing is stale, or what if you have your staff or don't have time to do this anymore. So I think probably for a part 2 session, it'd be great to come back and talk a little bit deeper into those conversations. So we thank you guys for joining us today. And again, put your questions. You can even put them in the comment section. Love to hear what you guys have to say. And we're excited that you joined us. And please share it with your friends. Everything that we're offering is just a freebie to you to get you engaged in what we're doing. So we're happy to help. And thanks for being here today.